Hello again, or if you're new, welcome, and welcome back to Chaos Head Noah, where last time we went to see our psychiatrist, but all we did was take a nap and get a prescription. But now, we begin to take a look back into our memories. I thought back to when Mom had taken me to the hospital about once a week. I'd kept my mouth shut at all times and only expressed myself via nodding or shaking my head. At first, I'd been taken to a perfectly ordinary examination room, but since I showed no signs of improvement, I started going to a different room before long. The room had essentially been a counseling room, which meant it put the patient's relaxation first and foremost. In other words, there were sofas and plushies and whatnot located all throughout the room. Dr. Takashina had taken a very patient approach to treating me, all while refusing to blame my situation on anyone. He alone caught on to how I was merely choosing not to speak, rather than having the inability to do so. Meanwhile, my mom would always talk to me in an unnaturally cheery voice. Every time I'd gone to the hospital, the doctor would always welcome me with a refreshing smile. The nurses also treated me with all the love and care they could, and
Hmm?
and I had a feeling that there had always been one more person in the room? Right. There had been a man in a black suit, one that felt fairly out of place in a hospital. As I'd been doing my best not to speak, I never asked about him. I didn't know who the hell he was the entire time he was there. He didn't feel like a doctor, and he always stood all alone a fair distance away from everyone else, all while gazing out the window. I had dubbed him Mr. Nozomi in my head, though that wasn't his actual name or anything.
のぞみ。
Nozomi. The man in the suit always had a badge on his chest, no matter the situation. And on that badge was the word Nozomi. It looked like a logo to me, though, so it probably wasn't a name tag. Oh, I knew why it was bothering me now. That test from before also had the Nozomi logo printed on it. I had a hunch that I'd seen it somewhere before, and now I finally remembered exactly where. It was like a huge weight had been lifted off my chest. That aside, what was Nozomi anyways? Was pretty sure it was the name of a business.
のぞみさんっていう美人女社長が設立したカウンターテロ組織とか、へへ、漫画みたいだ。
It could be a counter-terrorist organization founded by a gorgeous female CEO named Miss Nozomi. Just like a manga. When I'd arrived at my base, I'd gone straight to look up Nozomi online. However, there were so many results that I couldn't manage to pin down anything specific. Well, let's go with a more normal theory first. That Nozomi guy could have been from the company that made the test, and he was just at the hospital in order to sell them or something. The hospital had then adopted the test recently, and they decided to have me fill one out today. I doubted that. I'd never heard of some rando attending a patient's examination like that. So, who the hell was that Mr. Nozomi guy? Memories kept pulling at my mind, but I was fed up with it at that point. Either way, the reason behind my deja vu was now clear. I decided that I'd ask Dr. Takashina about my memory issues next week, but until then, I was going to stay cooped up in my room without bothering with school. There was no way in hell I'd go to a school where people were trying to hurt me. In all honesty, I really don't want to screw up the minimum attendance chart I'd so carefully constructed, but it wasn't worth getting myself killed over. I gave up on my Nozomi search and went to look for any interesting looking threads on AppChannel. New Gen News Bearer. New Gen number 1 equals Group Dive. New Gen number 2 equals Manchild. New Gen number 3 equals Crucifixion. New Gen number question mark equals To Be Continued. The news board was almost completely filled with New Gen threads. Even the ESO boards had threads like, let's try and replicate New Gen crimes in ESO, and to be honest, I was beyond sick and tired of the whole thing. Diving back into ESO, I found Grim. Neidhart, the ad channel news board is super fucking boring recently. It really won't STFU about new gen. Grim, well, it is the biggest thing of note recently. Whenever a new incident like this happens, people always freak the fuck out about it. Shitstorm incarnate. Neidhart, they still haven't caught the culprit? Grim, I mean, you and I both know the police are incompetent. There's tons of idiots all over the web painting the culprit as some moe hot chick. Neidhart, that demon girl. The desolate eyes of the girl I'd seen at the crucifixion murder scene flashed through my mind, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. As much as I didn't want to remember, that ghastly memory would come back any time I let my guard down. Wait, I'd seen the culprit's face. I knew who they were. Did I report it to the police? But I didn't want to get involved. Grim, demon girl? Is there already an offshoot of the perp like that? That might be taking it a bit too far, to be honest. Anyway, these new gen cases are seriously interesting, dude. I've joined the Frepara new gen community. Neidhart, you're getting way too into this. Grim, everyone but you and Sisson from our guild has joined. Oh my god, was he serious? Now I wouldn't be able to hop on and chat with my guild anymore. Grim, new gen is some weird shit, man. Gives me the chills. Neidhart, I knew you were into gory stuff, Grim, but don't tell me you're the type that looks for artistic merit in murder cases. True, the crucifixion corpse could have easily been mistaken for modern art, so it would be fair to say that it was artistic in some sense. Grim, nah, the only thing you should be seeking here is how lewd it is. It's like the ultimate form of BDSM. Neidhart, this guy's hopeless. I'd better do something quick. Grim, you'll get it once you leave behind your version hood, Neidhart Town. Neidhart, you lowly bastard. Are you saying you're not a virgin? You damn traitor. Grim, back on topic though. The site pooling all the info together is filling to the brim, so you really ought to take a look. Ugh, I really didn't want to look. I was scared to. I wanted to escape the reality in which I'd witnessed the scene of the crime. That's why I'd been intently avoiding all info relating to the new gen cases ever since. I wanted to fool myself into believing that the gruesome scene I'd seen had been just a delusion, but I was basically a god in ESO, not just someone strong, but someone who knew all. Not to mention, I was the guild leader. It'd be beyond embarrassing if the organizer of the group couldn't keep up with the latest topics. I had to make sure that didn't happen. I clicked the link to the site Grim had sent me. The top of the site had the title, All Things New Gen, written in big letters right in the center of the page. This type of website was basically like a wiki. It was open to the public, and anyone could enter info related to the particular topic. In the case of this new gen site, loads of people entered info concerning new gen and the site updated as they did. Sites like it tended to suffer from unreliable info being mixed in, as well as its fair share of vandalism from trolls, but they still could be pretty useful for getting a quick overview of an incident. Many links were pasted all over the page. I promptly clicked on the link that read, Current Timeline. My heart raced. Just reading the site was making me nervous. My palms were slick with sweat. The first incident, dubbed the group dive, was the suicide of 5 high schoolers that had jumped to their deaths. It had happened in the dead of night on September 7th, which was about a month ago at this point. The building they jumped off of was Cornelius Tower, which was located in Shibuya. They dove off of the rooftop helipad. Of course, all 5 had died instantly. According to the autopsies, the 5 all had foreign pieces of flesh under their fingernails, along with various scratch marks on their hands. Based on that, it was surmised that the five had been holding hands as they jumped, for one reason or another. There was no suicide note of any form on the rooftop. Person online, one of those people acting like Snake, had actually gone to Cornelius Tower themselves and reported that the door to the roof had a sign on it saying no entry to unauthorized personnel, and that it was locked practically 24/7. Naturally, the door had been locked at the time of the incident, and the key was not found among the belongings of the deceased. Essentially, the rooftop helipad had effectively been a locked room, and the method the five had used to enter was completely unknown. There was a very high chance that someone other than the five had been present at the scene of the crime. The second incident, dubbed the man-child murder case, had occurred 12 days after the first incident, placing it on September 19th. Early in the morning, a university student on their way home from a karaoke session had discovered a collapsed man covered in blood by the Shibuya Station underpass. The victim had been a university student residing in Shibuya Ward, a 21-year-old named Konoe Chizuo. He was already dead when he was discovered, but his abdomen had an unnatural, very large swelling. According to the autopsy, someone had performed an abdominal incision on the man, stuffed a newly born fetus inside the man's stomach, then stitched it back up. Moreover, a DNA test confirmed that the fetus had no blood relation to the victim. The victim was a bachelor and had no relations with any women. It was only online speculation, but it was assumed that the 32-week-old fetus had been removed from its mother's body via C-section. However, the mother's identity, current whereabouts, and even whether or not she was alive was completely unknown. It was possible that the police had already discovered her whereabouts, but if they had, nothing had been publicly revealed.
で、
I averted my eyes from the monitor to keep myself from throwing up. Jesus Christ, talk about nauseating. Culprit was completely insane, and maybe, just maybe, these ghastly murders had been carried out by that girl. Japan is over. I stared at Seraton in an attempt to bleach my eyes. And with that, I somehow managed to stabilize my mental state. I considered taking the meds the doctor had given me, but Seraton did the job nonetheless. Anyway, while that might have been necessary to maintain Neidhart's honor, reading all that gory stuff really fucking sucked.
そんなに辛いならさ、読まなくていいって。
If it's so hard, then you don't have to read it, you silly goose.
タッキーがド M ってんなら別に止めないけど。
So if you're a super masochist, then I won't stop you, Taki.
辛そうなタッキーは見てられないさ。
I just can't bear to see my Taki go through so much pain.
もうやめよう。楽しいことだけしてようよ。
So why don't you just stop? We can just stick to the fun things in life.
いつもみたく、あたしにハーハーしてもいいからさ。
You can just fap to me like you always do, silly. Oh, how wonderful and caring you are, Seraton. Seraton was the only one who would stay by my side. I couldn't ask for a better waifu. I rested my chin on my hands above the table, watching Seraton smile as I took deep breaths. Ah, my soul had been healed. I might be able to get through a little more if I kept glancing at her as I read, and so I decided to put that into practice right away. Come to think of it, why had those two unrelated cases both been slapped with the New Gen label? Apparently, the group dive had initially been treated as a group suicide. But after the man-child incident had occurred, people online reinvestigated it and discovered the unnatural circumstances surrounding the crime scene. Rumors then began to appear, saying that the five may have actually been killed and that the suicide label was merely a cover-up. According to the parents and good friends of the five victims, there was no way it could have been suicide. Then, the mass media had started making connections between the two incidents, starting with where they had occurred, Shibuya. Madness explodes in today's youth, the new generation madness. Sensationalist headlines like that had started popping up everywhere, to my understanding anyway. Then came the third case, the murder case I'd witnessed, dubbed the crucifixion. The site didn't have as much info on this case, likely due to it having only occurred recently. The victim, 56-year-old Ota Hisashi, was a university professor who had been crucified with stakes to the concrete wall of a vacant house. That was all that had been publicly revealed. Many of the neighboring residents had claimed that for over an hour after the time the crime was thought to have occurred, around 8 p.m., they could hear the sound of nails being hammered into something. Even I'd heard the sound. I could hear it even now. A horrible, terrifying sound. On a related note, no connection between the third case and the group dive or man-child had been discovered. But with it being the third abnormal incident to happen in quick succession in Shibuya, the crucifixion was naturally treated as another new-gen incident. The police and mass media believed that all the crimes had different culprits, but the predominant opinion online, or rather what most of the net hoped was going on, was that the crimes either shared a single culprit or an organized group of culprits. There also were many aqua-based theories whispered about online, such as that everything had begun with the earthquake from 2 months ago. 2 months ago, an earthquake with a seismic intensity of 3 occurred, with Shibuya at its epicenter. Although the scale was fairly minor, there were still 8 fatalities, which became a popular topic of discussion. Come to think of it, it was true that the new-gen cases had begun after that earthquake. Because of that, the new-gen occultists argued that the 8 deaths in the earthquake should be counted as the first new-gen incident, causing a dispute between them and the new-gen mainstreamers. Regardless, the entire situation was abnormal. After all, despite the fact that 3 brutal cases had occurred in quick succession, no clues on any of their culprits had been found. And many online were waiting eagerly for a 4th case. If I wasn't directly connected to it at all, I probably would have joined in on the chaos myself. Posted in a few threads, made a few theories. I could have been waiting excitedly for the 4th incident at this very moment. Damn it, all these assholes were just having the time of their lives, weren't they?
犯人を早く捕まえてくれよ。
Please just catch the culprit already. A week had passed since the crucifixion, but neither the demon girl nor the police had made any moves. If they knew I'd been at the scene of the crime, they would definitely come and question me about it, but there hadn't been any sign of that actually happening. But thank God, it looked like I wasn't going to get dragged into this after all.
あなたには予知能力がありますか？
Do you have precognitive powers? That claim Yua had thrusted at me flashed into my mind.
予知能力があるって思わなきゃ。納得できないような画像データをあなたが持っていたから。
Well, right here is an unaccountable digital picture that can only be explained by precognitive powers. That's why I had to ask. Even though I'd finally started to relax, that feeling of despair came flying right back in an instant. The image sent by Shogun, the data was still on my PC. Yua's claims were no more than delusions she dreamt up. Her deductions were a total stretch, not to mention logically bankrupt. While I might have ended up not asking about it in the hospital today, the idea of me doing things without remembering them was completely absurd, utterly impossible. I mean, nothing like that had ever happened to me before. So the gory image was obviously faked.
だったらさ、
In that case,
合成だって証拠を見つけちゃえばいいさ。
you should find proof that it's fake.
あの画像解析しちゃおうよ。
So let's give the picture a little look-see. But it's so disgusting. I really don't want to look at it any more than I already have.
あの女を論破しちゃえば、タッキーはもう怯えることなく平穏な生活に戻れるんだよ。
If you destroy that bimbo's argument, Taki, you'll be able to go back to your peaceful life, don't you know? And if you do that, there'll be nothing to fear no longer.
やるしかないっしょ。
So you know what you gotta do. Of course, she was exactly right. Yua had talked to me as if I were the culprit behind the crucifixion, but that wasn't true at all. I mean, I'd seen the culprit's face, as if I'd let Yua put the blame on me after that. So, with a gulp, I double-clicked on the folder where the images were cached. It was the first time in 3 days that Bon Yasuji had set foot in the Shibuya police station conference room. Investigation meeting for the Mariamacho crucifixion homicide case had already begun, and Bon was greeted with universal gazes of displeasure for his tardiness. Bon forced a polite smile before bending down to sit. He supposed that it was not quite the right time to reveal that he had been cooped up in the bathroom with diarrhea. The Mariamacho crucifixion homicide case had been assigned to the Shibuya police station on the morning after the incident. As they were lacking in manpower due to the Cornelius Tower mass suicide case and the Shibuya Station undergrad and fetus homicide case, even the third-rate assistant inspector, Bon, whom the Metropolitan Police Department's investigation division were practically begging to retire, had been called in by the main office. Moreover, as all the incidents had occurred within the Shibuya police station's jurisdiction, it was an unusual situation in which a single jurisdictional station was utilizing 3 special investigation teams. Because of this, operations were made quite difficult, with the 3 investigation teams having access to only one large conference room that they had to alternate between. The mass media was hailing it all as one large case known as New Gen, and there were rumors that the police would combine the 3 investigation teams in order to make a New Gen investigation division, thus solving the issue of manpower. All the detectives found this prospect completely asinine, regarding it as nothing more than an absolute joke.
警部補、君の報告を。
Assistant Inspector, your report? Bon's superior, Inspector Matsunaga, who was in charge of the investigation team, called out to Bon with a piercing gaze. But Bon did not notice this. He simply continued to cool himself down with a handheld fan as he took a moment to recuperate.
警部補、バン警部補、聞いているのか？
Assistant Inspector? Assistant Inspector Bon, are you listening to me?
呼ばれてるっすよ。バンさんの報告待ちなんすから。ちょっと。
The boss is calling you. Bon-san, he's waiting for your report. Hello? The whispers of Bon's partner, a rookie named Suwa, finally got him to realize he was being called.
すんません。報告は諏訪から。
Oh, sorry about that. Suwa will give the report.
自分っすか？
You want me to do it?
俺がいなくても報告しとけって言っといたろうが。
I did tell you if I wasn't here, so them's the breaks.
早くしろ。
Hurry it up. To his side as his superior jabbed him in the elbow, then stood up straight and tall.
犯行現場近くの監視カメラの解析がようやく出たっす。出ました。犯行時間に不審な人物が映ってました。
The analysis of the security camera footage from near the crime scene has finally finished up, concluded. The recording shows a suspicious individual present at the scene at around the time the crime was likely committed. Murmurs echoed throughout the conference room. The relaxed atmosphere from before had turned on its head. The other detectives began to take frantic notes in order to not miss a single word of Suwa's report. Considering the situation, it was no surprise they were so frantic about it. After all, 3 horrific cases had occurred within their jurisdiction in the span of a single month, only one of which was not ruled as a homicide as of yet. Their strong determination to find the culprit, even in the face of their reputations, was only natural.
プロジェクターに映像を出します。
I will show the footage on the projector. As per the instructions Bon had given him in advance, Suwa had the projector display the footage on the projector screen. The projector showed an image of the confined, filthy back alley of Mariamacho. It was night, and there was very few streetlights present, so virtually nothing was visible.
犯行現場から約50メートル離れたところにある コインパーキングの監視カメラです。
This is a security camera from a coin-operated parking lot located about 50 meters from the scene of the crime. The parking lot was only big enough to fit 2 vehicles. It was a tiny plot of land interposed between 2 buildings, and it was constructed without any real care as well. The scene of the crime was not visible in the footage, not even the path leading to it could be seen. All it displayed was the road that was one farther away from the crime scene. The video had no sound. The time the video had been recorded was graciously displayed on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, 9:34 p.m.
犯行現場近隣の住民の証言により、21時過ぎから21時半頃まで釘を打ちつける音がしていたというのはご承知の通りだと思いますが、
According to the testimony of residents near the crime scene, the sound of nails being hammered could be heard beginning from just past 9 p.m. and ending at around 9:30 p.m., which I imagine you already know.
この映像は21時34分。つまりまさに犯行時間直後ということになります。
This footage is from 9:34 p.m., which means it was recorded right after the time of the crime.
不審人物が映っているのは21時34分53秒からおよそ6秒間です。駐車場の前の道を奥から手前へと走り抜けていきます。
The suspicious individual is shown for around 6 seconds starting from 9:34:53. During that time, they run from the back of the road in front of the parking lot to the front. Immediately following Sua's explanation, a silhouette appeared on the footage. They seemed to be in a great hurry and ran from the back of the screen to the front. As the resolution was quite poor, not even their gender could be ascertained at a glance. But Bond had already gotten the crime laboratory to analyze that very point.
科捜研で解析した結果、映っている人物は男。年齢は10代後半から20代とのことっす。です。
The results of the forensic analysis show that the individual is a man, with an age estimated between late teens and early 20s.
人相の判別までは無理でした。服装がかなり特徴的ですが、これは小島にある私立水明学園の男子制服と分かりました。
It was impossible to discern their facial features. Their clothing, however, is fairly distinct, and it was discovered to be the male uniform of Suimei Private Academy, located in Shoto.
それと、右手に注目してもらいたいんですが、
Also, if you would direct your attention toward the right hand, the image enlarged on the right hand of the suspicious individual. It appeared to be grasping something.
スローで再生するとわかるが、走りながら腕を振っている際、この握りしめている何かが駐車場の照明に反射して光を放ってるんだな、これが。
Upon playing the footage back in slow motion, we discovered that when he waves his arms while running, the light reflects from the object he's holding thanks to the light present in the parking lot. Now with the good part, Bond took over Sua's explanation.
形状からして犯行に使われた十字架型の杭である可能性がある。
Judging by the shape, there's a possibility that it's the same kind of cross-shaped stake that was used in the crime. The detectives continued to murmur noisily. Crucifixion culprit may be a high schooler. The proposition was fairly shocking to them. After all, it meant that the new generation madness moniker that the mass media had been pushing could actually become a reality.
最も犯人に近い人物がこの少年だということか。
So then the closest person we have to suspect would be this boy, correct?
そういうことになりますね。
That would be the case indeed. Bond stroked the stubble on his jaw. It was a habit of his. Whenever he felt one step closer to cornering a culprit, he would always reach for that satisfying scraping sensation.
以上です。
That is all. Sua took a deep breath and sat down.
ひどいっすよ、先輩。美味しいところ持ってって。
You're the worst, sir. I can't believe you robbed me of the best part like that. Ignoring Sua's grumbling, Bond once again burned the image of the high school boy into his mind.
ようやく失 歩を出したんだ。そいつを掴んで離さねえようにしないとな。
So, you've finally shown yourself. Now I've just gotta grab onto you and never let go. Sure enough, the image Shogun had sent was in my cache folder. 168491.jpg was its name. Obviously, a part of me was still hesitant to even look at it. I mean, it was a pretty fucking nasty image, grotesque as all hell, too. I was sure just looking at it would throw me right back to the scene of the crucifixion where that violent scene had taken place right in front of me. But even then, I needed to expose Yua's flawed logic, and therefore guarantee my own safety and innocence. Thankfully, Seraton was there for me. I could handle a little bit of gore. Mustering all the courage I had, I double-clicked the file. God, it was so gory. But compared to the crucifixion scene I'd seen in person, it wasn't quite as bad. Telling myself that the image had to be fake, I was just barely able to stomach it. When I'd first received the image, I'd closed it immediately after looking at it once. I hadn't inspected it thoroughly. This time, holding back the urge to vomit, I decided to examine the image in excruciating detail. I didn't know much about how to tell whether a picture was fake or not, but taking a look at the shadows, seeing if there was anything off about the surrounding area, and other stuff like that should probably be enough. The only possibility I had in mind was that the photo had been taken in advance, and the crucifixion corpse had then been put on top of it using CGI. And then, the day after Shogun had sent the picture to me, they executed the crime exactly as they'd edited it in the image. Thanks to the poor resolution and how dark the image was, I could only really see the stakes, leaving the identity of the victim unclear. Light was only hitting the area surrounding the corpse, yet something about the image was just begging for me to look at the crucifixion itself. It felt like that was the intent of the person who'd made it. I mean, come on, focusing that much light around the corpse was kind of overkill, don't you think? Well, it wasn't like I'd been paying close attention to the actual crime scene, so I couldn't really jump to conclusions. In the picture, the demon girl wasn't standing in front of the crucified corpse. But when I opened my eyes wide and looked even closer, I noticed a silhouette in a dark spot on the left side of the image. I'd almost completely missed it. Due to the low res of the image, the shadow the figure stood in blended perfectly into the surrounding scenery. You could easily miss it if you weren't paying close attention. Obviously, the image was fake, but what if the person who'd taken the photo had accidentally left themselves in it? It was possible that they'd forgotten to edit themselves out when they tampered with the image. Looked like they were wearing a Suime uniform. In that case, it had to be the demon girl. She'd been wearing one at the time of the crime, after all. But when I took a closer look, I noticed that the figure's hair was actually pretty short. The demon girl had long hair like Yua. Alright then, time for some computer magic. I needed the details here. I opened up some image processing software and dragged the image in. Then, with a big gulp, I selected the Levels option in the Adjustments menu, and brightened the once darkened corners of the image.
Eh?
What? What the hell?
Nanda kore?
What? No, what that's... Pictured on the screen. Pictured on the screen was unmistakably
僕だ。
me. How was it me? It didn't make any sense. I'd never even been there before September 29th. It was fake. It had to be fake. I couldn't find any bit of proof that it was, but it absolutely had to be. Nothing made sense otherwise. I mean, Shogun had sent the image on the 28th, and the crucifixion murder case had occurred on the 29th. If the image was of what had happened on the 29th, then that would mean it was a picture taken from the future.
あなたには予知能力がありますか？
Do you have precognitive powers?
うるさい、そんなはずはないんだ。
Fuck you, there's no way I have powers. I kicked the plastic bottle at my feet and closed the paint program. I checked the vial's properties to see when it was made, and then I lost all words. The timestamp was the 28th, but that was the least of my worries now. In the comment section of the properties menu was a single inconspicuous sentence, a sentence my eyes couldn't look away from. Whose eyes are those eyes? I slammed my hands on the keyboard before shoving it to the edge of my desk. I clutched my head.
セーラ、助けて。
Save me, Sarah. I could barely hold back my tears. What the hell had I done to deserve a whole week of nothing but more and more insane bullshit? Why was I the only one that had to deal with this shit? Hang on a second. If they had somehow managed to get a photo of me, and then they'd edited it into the image of the crime scene, that would either mean Shogun had taken a photo of me without my consent, or that he had somehow obtained my photo from another source. And considering how he'd suddenly entered the chat room and started talking to me right after Grimm had left, he had likely been aiming for me and me alone from the very start. Shogun might very well have discovered my real identity. If that was true, then Shogun, the demon girl, anyone could raid my base at any moment, and then I'd be abducted. I felt a chill on the nape of my neck. It was the gaze again. There was something there, watching me. Don't look at me. Did you really think I'd turn around? I knew the rules of the game better than anyone. The it'll take more than that to make me turn around game. Did you really think I'd turn around? I knew the rules of the game better than anyone. The it'll take more than that to make me turn around game. Fear sent goosebumps all over my body, and I felt a strong urge to check that the door was locked. But instead of doing that, I just continued to stare at my monitor, as I was way too stubborn to let myself lose. Unable to calm down, I opened up my default word processor and wrote down everything on my mind. That has to be it. Demon girl equals cold-blooded murderer, has precognitive powers. Shogun equals demon girl's underling. Yua equals Shogun's underling. As I stared fearfully at the word demon, I began to wonder if the girl at the crime scene was actually a real demon. I mean, come on, she couldn't be human by any means. If she was a demon, she might actually be able to see the future. And if she could see the future, projecting a scene from the future onto a picture via psychic photography would be child's play. It would line up perfectly with how she'd somehow managed to carry out the gruesome crucifixion all on her own. She'd then gotten her underling Shogun to send the image to me, a person who she knew would end up accidentally witnessing the crime. I didn't know why she'd done that. Maybe it was a threat. This'll be you next if you tell anyone what you saw? Or maybe it was a death sentence. You're next. And if that really was what it meant, then
勝てるわけがない。
I'm fucked.
僕は奴らにいつ殺されてもおかしくないんだ。
They could come and murder me at any moment. Kusunoki Yua faced the PC in her room. Her profile gravely serious, she swiftly read through the information displayed on the monitor. Before long, Yua let out a small sigh and released her hand from the mouse, glancing at a piece of paper sitting within reach. It was the very same paper she had put before Nishijo Takumi the day before, the printout of the chat log between Neidhart and Shogun.
西条くん。
Yua muttered a single name. The view of Takumi sitting alone on that Shoto Park bench appeared in her mind before she quickly shook her head to drown it out. Suddenly, she looked behind herself in surprise.
今、誰かに見られていたような。
Just now, it felt like someone was watching me. Her gaze stopped upon a large stuffed ghetto froggy enshrined on her bed. Wondering if it had just been her imagination, she tilted her head in puzzlement. Then she slowly rose to her feet, walked over to the bed, and fell onto it head first. The sheet smelled of the sun. It seemed that her mother had kindly dried the futon earlier today. Yua buried her face in that relieving scent, her gaze wandering around vacantly. Her room was very neat and orderly, placing her meticulous personality on full display. This especially applied to her large bookshelf, which was rather incongruous for a room sized at around 13 square meters. It was packed tightly with countless books, leaving hardly any gaps. However, charmingly, the lower half consisted of nothing but complex academic books, computing-related books, and other similar material, contrasting greatly with the upper half, which was filled with shoujo manga and anime DVDs. With another sigh, Yua turned her body face up and stared at the ceiling.
DID。
EID. She muttered the name of the mental illness she had just been researching. An explanation related to it was still displayed on her monitor.
辛いんですね。
It must be so hard. Yua hugged the stuffed ghetto froggy by her pillow tightly as she thought about Takumi.
でも、私、
But I... However, her expression soon vanished, replaced only by the gritting of her teeth. It hurt to breathe. All I was doing was looking things up on my PC, yet it hurt to breathe. I could feel my heart pounding harder than it ever had before. And of course, the feeling that something was watching me would not go away. I was still just barely keeping myself from turning around, but I knew I couldn't do it for much longer. What the fuck is wrong with you? Show yourself, asshole! I cried out angrily at whatever it was. Surely it wasn't the demon girl, right? Oh god, what if it was? She could be using second sight, or clairvoyance, or some other demonic power to spy on me. The chills on the back of my neck were gradually growing stronger, to the point where they were getting slightly painful, like jolts of electricity coursing through my body. I was covered from head to toe in sweat. The front of my t-shirt was completely soaked. God damn it! Unable to take it anymore, I whipped around in my chair as forcefully as I could, and yet all I saw was my room, in the same condition as always. I didn't see a single thing that shouldn't have been there. How are you not there? Who are you? With a yell that was closer to a shriek than anything, I burst up from my chair and went to make sure the door was locked, and much to my relief, it was. I wiped away the sweat on my forehead with my sleeve. Returning to my PC, I focused on the monitor once more. It was still displaying what I had been researching earlier, precognition. Precognition, to know what is going to happen in advance. To foresee an unusual phenomenon, also known as foresight or foreknowledge. When I was a kid, I truly believed that precognition existed, that psychics existed, and if I was being completely honest, I still did to a degree. That was why my first thought had been that the image from Shogun and the demon girl was a precognitive photograph, a thought which only drove me to look into it all the more. What if maybe, just maybe, there were tons of psychics all over the world and I just didn't know? Back when I was a kid, when that bus accident happened, I'd managed something that had been pretty close to precognition. For that reason, I couldn't completely rule out its existence. But no matter how much I searched, all I could find was extremely dubious articles about the occult, voodoo shit, or whatever else. There was absolutely nothing that proved scientifically whether it existed or not.
一つぐらいあってもいいだろ
There has to be at least something. Growing increasingly frustrated, I violently tapped away at the keyboard. I just couldn't deal with how anxious not having a concrete answer made me. Was the world really telling me to give up? To wait here, trembling in fear of demons that might or might not come? I couldn't stay sane like that. Of course, I would have vastly, vastly preferred to learn that precognition didn't exist, but regardless of what the truth was, I needed to know it. Badly. Pretty much out of options, I decided to take a look at @Channel's alcohol board. The place was typically home to nothing but total BS noise, lies and misinformation mainly, but it actually had some pretty mind-blowing and even useful information scattered on it sometimes. Fighting back how frantic I was, I opened up @Channel. Then I clicked on the alcohol board and gave precognition a search. And when I did,
Huh?
my search pulled up a surprising number of threads, about 30 of them. Was precognition a hot topic on @Channel at the moment? With a gulp, I checked the threads' titles one by one.
ファンタズム FES
Phantasm. Fez. Most of the threads contained two key words. In addition, new gen discussions had also wormed its way in, with lots of unsettling terms like prophetic lyrics and murderer being used. Having never heard of Phantasm before, I went to Google them. Apparently, they were a Shibuya-based 4-piece gothic punk band that had been doing live concerts recently. They were so popular, in fact, that they were completely dominating the indie music scene, with a female vocalist known only as Fez. Anyway, to check whether it was related to precognition or not, I clicked on the thread at the top titled Precognition and Prophecies, Phantasm General, New Gen, 43, and gave the contents a brief skim. Calm your tits, everyone, but yeah, let's all go to the concert Sunday. Those who do will enjoy Fez Sama's Black Mass without letting any of it go to waste. Miss out, and you'll be getting the crucifixion treatment. I read the lyrics, but it still feels like a stretch. The phrasing is vague as shit. There's no way any are actual prophecies. If I'm wrong, though, have mercy on me, crucifixion killer. Calling it precognition or a prophecy or whatever the fuck is taking it way too far. This ain't Nostradamus, so how about we just sit back and enjoy the music for what it is? Fez's stuff ain't bad lyrically, but I def can feel the new gen connection, to be honest. Everyone always talks about Fez. R.I.P. the composer Rio, poor guy's getting no credit. Fezton's lyrics force me to find the meaning of life. It's a trap. Fezton is my waifu. Take that to the BDSM thread. Also, Fez is my waifu, actually. Stop bumping this shit. This what you guys mean by new gen prophecy stuff? O servant, revealed by the light of the moonlit night, connect the phantasmal paths which lead to this place. Little do they know, their screams will soon turn to silence, and repose shall fall upon us as we link hand in hand with the wind. By the way, I say fuck Phantasm. Like, LMAO, their fans are terrifying. You'd think they were all brainwashed. Now you're gonna get it. Don't leak the lyrics, dumbass. What a brainless troll. Those lyrics. Depending on how you interpreted them, they could be seen as referring to the group dive. And yet, those lyrics had been released 2 months ago, which meant they hadn't been written after the crucifixion.
これが予知ってこと
Is this precognition? Could it just be a coincidence? Or could Phantasm be yet another one of the demon girl's underlings? I read the thread in more detail, only to find out that each of the 3 New Gen incidents had all been prophesied by Phantasm's lyrics. However, the lyrics for the songs that supposedly prophesied the man-child and crucifixion incidents had not been posted on @channel. Apparently, uploading them online was viewed as a taboo of sorts. The philosophy seemed to be, if you really want to know, just go to the concerts and buy an album yourself. Regardless, there were a great number of people online trying to predict the next New Gen case based on the songs Phantasm had performed thus far. And apparently, ever since New Gen kicked off, Phantasm's albums had been completely selling out. They had been so successful, in fact, that even the mainstream media had picked up on it. Gothic band boasting cult following rises among the youth of Shibuya. News stories like that were popping up all over the place. The one writing the lyrics was the head singer, Fez. Nobody knew her real name. What if Fez was actually a demon girl? If she was, it would explain how she'd managed to prophesize the incidents literal months before they'd occurred. The demon girl was the culprit after all. I tried doing an image search, but I couldn't find any good photos of her face. All the pictures were taken by phones during her concerts, and they were so blurry that I couldn't even begin to make out her face.
くそ。
I wiped my sweat-drenched forehead with the hem of my shirt. I was frustrated. I was scared. I couldn't believe anything. I didn't even want to see anything. Several emotions swirled within me, suffocating me. My breathing hadn't even come close to stabilizing this entire time. But even so, I knew one thing was for certain. I needed to see Fez's face. With trembling fingers, I typed in Phantasm's name and clicked on their official website. The site was mostly black, decorated only by text of a uniform deep crimson color. It was unrelenting in its simplicity, and yet it felt so incredibly eerie and strange. There was barely anything on the site at all, just basic information on their concerts and discography. There wasn't even a single image. There were no profiles on the band members, nor anything on their song lyrics.
やっぱり犯人だけあってネットに顔写真が流出しないようにしてるのか。
Well, if they were the culprit, they wouldn't want their face on the internet anyway. Talk about thorough. Took a look at their performance schedule and saw that they typically performed about every other week. The next concert was
あさって。
the day after tomorrow. If I went to it, I'd be able to check whether Fez was the demon girl or not. But even if I did find out they were one and the same, what would I even do? Report Fez to the police? Cry and beg for her to leave me alone? Bring a crucifix and attempt a mock exorcism? Yeah, none of those were gonna happen. I was up against a demon. There was no way in hell an otaku freak like me could come out on top. Problem is, if I didn't, I'd die. She'd transform my corpse into her newest art piece, and I'd be posted on the All Things New Gen site as another case.
そんなのやだ。
Fuck that. And if I didn't do something, I'd never find out what that picture of me that Shogun had sent really meant. And on the off chance that Fez wasn't connected to the demon girl, maybe I could ask her to help me fight against whoever the demon girl actually was.
だけどやっぱり無理だ。ライブなんて行けるわけがない。
Like that's ever gonna happen. I'd never survive going to a concert. I'd never been to one in my life. That sort of thing was infinitely beyond my comfort zone. Not to mention concert halls were cramped and dark and noisy and crowded. Just imagining a place like that made me want to hurl. I was at my wit's end. I had no idea what to do. The chills on the back of my neck still hadn't gone away, and the painful, prickling sensation suddenly turned into a burning one. I looked behind me yet again, but, like always, nobody was there.
もうやめてよ。
Now just stop, please. Closed my eyes tightly, focusing on nothing other than waiting for the gaze to disappear. I didn't want to go through this torment for the rest of my life. For all I knew, the gaze would straight up kill me someday.
考えろ、匠。
Think, Takumi.
僕にできることを考えろ。
What can I do? Think. Hiding in the shadow of a telephone pole, I looked at the Gigantes concert hall from afar. After agonizing over it all day yesterday, I'd somehow managed to nut up and did what needed to be done. So here I was, Gigantes. It was located on a narrow street in Shibuya, beneath the elevated railroad tracks. It had a very distinct red brick exterior. The exterior was lit up too, giving off an old-fashioned, austere vibe that made it feel as if I'd been transported back in time to the 50s or something. To think that a spot like this was in Shibuya of all places, I'd had no idea it even existed until yesterday. It was only 5 minutes from the station on foot, yet there weren't very many people at all. Every once in a while, a train would pass over the elevated tracks with a tremendous roar, and the telephone pole I was hiding behind would tremble slightly. That was about it. Just a moment ago, there had been a bunch of what appeared to be Phantasm fans in front of Gigantes. Some of them were wearing outfits so out there, I'd almost mistaken them for cosplayers. However, what surprised me the most was that there honestly weren't that many of them. Despite being such a huge topic online, there must have been no more than 100 people there. Regardless, they were all inside the building now. The concert had already begun, but since none of the audio managed to bleed outside, it certainly didn't feel like it. My heart palpitations had gone away after I'd fallen asleep yesterday, but they'd come back with a vengeance the second I'd arrived in front of the venue. It'd been so hard to breathe, I'd almost thought I was dealing with some kind of heart failure. But really, I knew exactly why it was so bad. This place was filled with a thick, impenetrable darkness. The demon girl and her underlings could be lurking around any corner. Knowing that, I'd been on the lookout for anyone that might attack me ever since I got here. The sheer anxiety and paranoia was comparable to what it felt like going through the Wands volcano dungeon in ESO. Mobs in the Wands volcano dungeon were OP as hell, and it was surrounded by the kind of lava that insta-killed you if you so much as clipped it with your pinky toe. That shit couldn't have been playtested. The amount of times I died there, holy hell. I wiped the sweat off my forehead with a hand towel and gulped down a gob of saliva. Right as I did, the door at the top of the stairs opened, and the furious beating of drums reverberated from inside Gigantes for a few seconds. A single guy exited the door. He jogged nimbly down the stairs and then toward me.
Yo, Taku. Matta ka?
What's up, Taku? Been waiting long? I had invited Misumi-kun to go to the venue with me. As I didn't know his phone number, I'd been forced to go to school today just to ask him to go. If he hadn't come with me, I probably wouldn't have even made it this far. And even if I'd somehow forced myself to go in the building alone, if the demon girl was there, it would have been a certified game over. So, I had Misumi-kun operate as a scout. I did feel bad about throwing him into the line of fire, so I obviously hadn't told him about that part. The only people I could rely on were him and Nanami, so I picked the less annoying of the two, Misumi-kun. I even covered his ticket cost, so in a sense, you could say I had hired him for 1,000 yen.
ほらよ。これ CD な。俺自分の分も買っちまったよ。
Right, here's your CD. I grabbed one for myself, too. Misumi-kun handed me a Phantasm album. They were being sold for an outrageous premium in online auctions, but I'd heard on @channel that they were also available at their concerts, so I'd asked Misumi-kun to buy one for me. And now that I had one, I'd achieved half of the goals I'd set out for myself. As for the remaining half...
いやー、予想以上にいいな。ファンタズムって。
Honestly, though, they're way better than I thought they'd be. Phantasm, I mean. Misumi-kun had been acting pretty excited ever since he'd exited the venue.
俺、あんまミーハーになりたくなかったんで聞こうとしなかったんだけどよ。今日ちょっと生で聞いただけでファンになっちまった。
Never really listened to him before, cause, you know me, I'm no sheep. Besides, I figured they were overhyped, but just that little bit I heard just now was enough to make me a real fan. The other thing I'd asked Misumi-kun to do was report anything in particular that stood out about the band members. I knew they would all come out on stage once the concert started, so all I'd wanted him to do was a quick scan, then head back to me right after. And yet, despite my very specific instructions, he hadn't come back for a full 5 minutes after the show started. This was probably because he'd listened to the entirety of the first song.
特にボーカル。ありゃマジでいい女だぜ。
Dude, the singer? Fine ass woman right there.
お前、女見る目あるな。
You've got some good taste, my man. I sighed internally, thinking with the wrong head like usual. Why was I even surprised? So much for I'm no sheep.
どんな人だった？
But what did she look like?
ああ、そっか。報告な。なんか探偵みてえで面白いな。そう思わねえ？
Oh, right, the report. I dig this, by the way. Kinda feels like I'm a detective or some shit, you know? Misumi grinned to himself, and I pressed him again to tell me about Fez's appearance.
髪型はショートカットだった。
Well, for starters, she had short hair.
え？
And just like that, there was already a huge discrepancy. Did that mean Fez wasn't the demon girl? No, wait, I couldn't let myself jump to conclusions here. She could have cut her hair, or she could have used hair extensions, or she could have changed it in some other way. It wouldn't surprise me if she'd been in disguise when I'd seen her at the crime scene.
スタイルがすっげえ良くて、あと背が高かったな。ありゃ俺と同じぐらいはあるんじゃねえの？
Yeah, the hottest bod. Real hourglass type shit. And she was tall, too. Might even be the same height as me.
背が。
She's tall. And the same height as you? Misumi-kun and I were about the same height, which meant Fez was probably about 170 centimeters tall. Pretty tall for a girl. But I hadn't gotten that impression at all when I'd encountered the demon girl. My memories from back then were hazy, but I still felt like the demon girl had been shorter than me. Yet another thing that didn't line up then.
他には？
Anything else?
そうだな。アンニュイな雰囲気してたな。
Oh yeah, she had this aloof vibe to her. Too cool for school type thing.
声はクールってイメージかな。結構ボソボソと喋るタイプだった。
The way she spoke had a big part in that. She's the kind of girl to talk in whispers.
胸のサイズはまあま
As for the ditch, she doesn't have much going on.
あ。でもゴスパンの服は妙な色気があったぜ。ああいうのもありだな。断然あり。
But that goth outfit more than made up for it. It was crazy how hot it was. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. Oh god damn it, every single word he said was completely fucking useless. Then again, I'd only gotten a quick look at the demon girl, so I couldn't exactly list her features. His plan was probably doomed from the start.
っていうかよ。そんなにフェスに興味あるなら自分の目で見ればいいじゃねえか。ほら、行こうぜ。
But anyway, since you're so interested in Fez, you really ought to take a look for yourself. Let's hit it.
え？
Misumi-kun began to push me from behind, forcing me up the stairs to Gigante's. I desperately tried to fight back, but Misumi-kun was stronger than me. I couldn't get away.
待って。
Wait.
見たいんだろフェスの顔を。素直になるって。
You want to see Fez's face, right? Come on, be honest.
浮気ってのは男の差がだよな。たくも大人になったもんだぜ。
Fooling around with another chick's a big part of a man's life. Talking, my boy, you're finally becoming a man.
は？
What?
この前一緒に帰ってたメガネの子のことは今夜だけは気にすんなって。俺も田中のことは忘れるからよ。
Just pretend that glasses girl you went home with the other day doesn't exist. I'll be forgetting about Tanaka myself. What the hell was he talking about? I tried to stand my ground and fight back, but to my horror, I realized that I was already at the top of the stairs. While it was only the second floor, if I were to slip and fall, it would hurt like hell. Just the thought made me stop resisting as hard. And in that moment of weakness, my entire body weight was sent crashing through the door and into the venue. Alrighty, and with that, we'll go ahead and save the concert for next time. But until then, class dismissed.